Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. We're back with another look at 20th Century Boys. And for those of you who have been following this process for the last year or so, we're almost at the end. Yes, this is the final book, volume 11. And a lot of important stuff happens in this volume. I'm just going to touch lightly on it. As usual, it's hard to discuss a lot of this stuff without spoiling things. So, especially if you're new to the channel and you're used to my reviews where I give a spoiler free section and then a critique section that has all of the spoilers in it, this is pretty much entirely critique. 20th Century Boys has been around since the end of the 20th century. Actually, I believe it started just after the turn of the 20th century, which makes it a little bit of an anachronism, to be fair. But the story itself is pretty old, so I don't feel too bad about putting spoilers out there. I'm discussing it more in the hopes that people will either add to the commentary about the series, which is admittedly on the sparse side, not that no one has discussed it, but either add to the commentary on it or be encouraged to go and look at the story themselves. But I am interested in this because I think this is my favorite manga ever written. And not necessarily the best, but my favorite. And I wanted to talk about it and give some insight into why. Now, I have said that I think the final act is one of the weakest parts of the story, not because it's shot through with errors, but because some of the lack of planning that went into the story's heavier intricacies kind of shows at this point. We'll discuss that more when we get into it, but let's just go through the story and talk it over. We start with the DJ. Now, if you recall, in the previous volumes, we've seen this guy playing Kenji's music over the radio into the post-apocalyptic Japan he now inhabits. And this first chapter or so, he's a very hippie kind of a guy, you can see, focuses on this nameless DJ. We see him get a phone call from somebody who asks him if he's the guy playing music over the radio. We see him realize he's gone through all of the abandoned supermarkets, so he has to go farther afield to get food. And most importantly, he goes to a place and he finds a man who has locked himself into a warehouse for the last 3 years, basically since the plague of 2015. And this is important for a couple of reasons, but not the most important part of the story. So eventually, we learn that the DJ is a childhood friend of Kenji's. And this is, again, something that rather disappoints me. When the DJ was first introduced, I thought he was just a character out in the wilderness who enjoyed Kenji's music and was moved by it. It turns out that no, he's another one of Kenji's band of friends from 1970. Not a central member, but we have seen him in the background of several of the flashbacks that we've seen, pretty much through the course of this entire story, because this is a story about Kenji at all parts of his life, as well as, of course, Kenji's circle of friends. And I guess I understand why Urasawa would want to establish what happened to Kanchi, this young kid we see in many of these flashbacks, because we are dealing with the question of who is wearing Friend's mask. And Kanchi is a natural candidate because he's been in all the flashbacks, but he hasn't really been important to the modern day story up until this point. And at this point, Urasawa is just disqualifying this background character. So it's kind of important to that sense, but he gets like 3 chapters worth of, 60 pages of story. That's a lot of story in the third act when we've really only seen him in the background of previous acts. And I think he's only been named once or twice. He's never been important. And this is a lot of work just to say, well, he's not the guy who is now secretly our friend. That, in and of itself, I think would be a total waste of page count, even though the character work with Kanchi and Kenji and his friends in the flashback is pretty good. The one thing that I think salvages all of this is it turns out the guy who has locked himself into the warehouse is Tamuro Masao, or Number 13. the FDP's personal hitman, basically. Ever since he tried to assassinate the Pope and instead hit the Friend impersonator at the World Expo, he's been in hiding. He knew he was kicking off something bad, and he hadn't realized that the man who inducted him into the FDP was now dead and was replaced by a lookalike. And that makes that apparently made him very upset. We don't get a whole lot of reflection on that just yet, but clearly this shook his faith in the FDP, and he has abandoned the cause, and the FDP is hunting him now. So Conchi and Number 13 escape because Number 13 brought a helicopter there 3 years ago, and it's still there, and they use that to escape the FDP that came for Conchi. After that, kind of slow introduction in the first 2 chapters, we go to Rome, and particularly Vatican City. And there we see that Father Nittany has been trying to get in touch with the Pope. The Pope has been ill, not with the virus of 2015, but rather a more conventional illness, and he's lying low. Nittany manages, after about half a chapter, I guess a whole chapter's work, he manages to make contact with the Pope, and the Pope is now firmly on the anti-FDP side. All in all, again, it's a good character moment, and it has more bearing on the actual plot that we're going to be seeing. Not to mention, it doesn't introduce a new character. Father Nittany is actually a very fascinating character and an important one in unpacking the second act. So it's nice to see him again here. No, he's still alive and kicking, and he has a small hand to play in unfolding the final confrontation, as it were. Beyond that, we come back to Cho-san, or Cho-Cho, as people are calling him now, and he's kind of devolved from the questioning police officer to this strange guy in a farmer's hat and a poncho. He's joined the train of people following Kenji to Tokyo, and they've gotten to the walls of Tokyo. Of course, the FDP has walled Tokyo proper off from the rest of the world, and Kenji is trying to figure out how to get in. Some of his scouts find the sewer tunnels that will take them into the city proper. And plot-wise, that's all that's really important that happens here. But we do get an important discussion between Cho and Kenji about the World's Fair. One of the problems with Friend is he has always been stuck in his childhood, and that is true both of the original and of the man who took his place. They are obsessed with the games they played as children. They are obsessed with trying to make them real in the modern era. And one of the things that highlights this fact is that they brought back the Expo of 1970, and they tried to reopen it in 2015. And since then, they have kept it open. They have declared it sacred ground because Friend saved the Pope's life during an attempted assassination there. Of course, the FDP set that up and then foiled it themselves. So it's all a show, it's all a sham, but that is what they are trying to say. They are saying, we are trying to recreate our childhood and make it the world forever. And of course, that's childish, that's immature, but it is this immaturity, this inability to take responsibility in the world around them that defines the FDP as a whole. And Kenji, of course, rejects it entirely. Remember, this is the first time we've seen Kenji since the FDP definitively became the most powerful people in Japan and later the world. And he's incensed at the idea that the World Expo is ongoing constantly. He says, you can't have a constant World Expo. It's something that's one summer long, and it's way far away in Osaka, not right in your own backyard. It's a thing you dream about. It's a thing you read about. It's a thing you know almost so well you went yourself. That is what a World Expo is. It is a transient thing that you think about and that you carry into the future as a dream. It is not a permanent, ongoing fixture of the real world. And I think that difference in perspective sums up the difference between Kenji and Friend in a nutshell. I thought it was a very excellent piece of character work that plays on the values of each of the characters involved beautifully. Um, Also, we find out that Chosan, when he was in the Sun Tower, which is a fixture, an odd monument kind of thing, really tall, looks like a bird with a human face and its wings outstretched. Um, he went in there when he was attempting to foil the Pope's assassination. He saw the shadows of two children running around, and he heard them whispering, "Kenji, let's play." I'm going to talk more about what I think this means at the end, but this is an important character moment. We later see the false friend inside the tower experiencing much the same thing. And this is, of course, a reflection of their immaturity, but also a reflection of the fact that their game is not meaningful unless someone plays with them. And we saw this during Bloody New Year's Eve in the year 2000, of course, when Friend's challenge to Kenji was, "Let's play." Friend still sees this as a game, and if he doesn't have somebody to play with, it's meaningless. I think that's important. Part of the importance of Kenji's character arc. At the beginning, he was determined to fight directly against Friend, and now Kenji's just here to play his music. But more on that later, because we don't completely fulfill that here. So we continue to get these hints that Koizumi is going to be a great bowler, and Kami-sama is going to be her manager and promoter. That's pretty fun. Mostly, though, it serves as a setup for something that happens in a little bit. We see that Kana and Acho and Iji, and even later Yoshitsune are all coming together to try and foil Friend's plans to exterminate the human race. They have their flying saucer craft out running around, spraying paint everywhere, simulating alien attacks, because that's their latest shtick. They don't have the Kenji faction to fight against, so they've made up space aliens. And they're spraying paint to test their distribution system. Eventually, of course, they're going to use these flying saucers to distribute their latest bioweapon to wipe out all of Tokyo. And our heroes are coming together in an attempt to find a safe place. And in a display of the excellent use of humorous moments to make the nuts and bolts of a solution to a very serious problem, which is something Urasawa is very good at and has demonstrated repeatedly over the course of the story, we discover that Kami-sama and Kyoko were not hit with paint while they were out bowling, even though by the time the paint attack came, they were eating at an outdoor cafe celebrating Koizumi's win. Which tells them that wherever they were at is going to be a safe place for people to take shelter during the final bioweapon attack. They put all the pieces together and they realize it's the expo center because, of course, that's the most important thing to Friend. It's probably where he's going to sit out the attack. So everyone needs to go there. Everyone in Tokyo needs to go there because they can't get out through the walls. It's a very simple, straightforward, almost mechanical bit of storytelling. The heroes have this problem they need to solve. How are they going to solve it? They get all the pieces. They put them together. Okay. It's meaningful storytelling. It's not very character-driven storytelling. It is plot-driven storytelling, though. And it does give us a chance to bring Yoshitsune, Acho, Yukiji, and Kana back together. We're bringing the whole band back together again. Of course, since the hero always arrives late, Kenji will show up eventually, I'm sure. The only other important thing in here, well, I take that back. There are two important things. Karo-yan and Maro are gathering everything together at the secret base. And they are discussing, because obviously they have the antidote from Kiriko, Kenji's sister, as we saw in the last segment. And they are going to bring that to Tokyo in an attempt to foil the final attack by the FDP. And there is a moment of reflection between Maro and Karo-yan and Yoshitsune and everyone else, Acho and Yukiji, as they try to remember what happened when their secret base was destroyed in the summer of 1969. And it shows it shows that how you think about your past is always tainted by the present. It's an object lesson because all of these people who have been fighting to undo this evil thing for so long look back on this unfortunate but really insignificant thing that happened in their childhood, and they all see themselves as responsible for it, for allowing this small tragedy to occur in their childhoods. And as they begin to rally and gather themselves together, their perspective changes, and they realize that actually the bullies who tore down their grass fort did not do it as easily as they thought. Everyone put up a fight. Everyone was there, and they stuck together, and they stuck by each other. And even though the fort ultimately got torn down by Yanbo and Mabo, what was built there, the friendships between them, have endured all this time. And we're going to see if they can make it work once again. That's the setup for our heroes. They are pretty much all there, except, of course, for Kenji, who is getting ready for his dramatic entrance. So it's time for the villain to make his final appearance. And I really like this because it really drives home something important. It drives home that Friend really is just a 2-bit 10th grade, after school special villain. He is just in it for himself. He just wants to be the center of attention. And all this time, he's been blaming Kenji or space aliens or a whole bunch of other things for the bad things that Friend himself has done. So here at the end, we see Friend don the mask one final time, and he gets on his PA system to make an announcement. And there's an interesting flashback at the beginning because he puts on 20th Century Boys and he plays it on a record player over his public announcement system, just like Kenji did on lunch break at the very beginning of the manga. And then he makes his announcement. He says, "You think all this time I've been the guy planning to save you, but I'm the guy plotted everything." He confesses everything. No one has to drag the truth out of him. He just says, "I'm the bad guy. Now I'm going to wipe out the human race. Just wanted you to know it's all about me." And then in the perfect ending, he says, "Just as God took 7 days to create the world, I will end the world in 7 days." So we get a ticking clock, a 1-week time frame. We get Friend actually saying, "Hey, I'm a god," which is how he's been acting ever since he saved the Pope in 2015. All the imagery and symbolism has been there, and now he's just saying it. What a great villain moment. And he's setting himself up to wipe out the human race, just like these villains that he was inspired by. It's a good character moment for Friend, or the person now wearing the Friend mask. We get several flashbacks to him as a child from his point of view, where he's showing his plans to Yamane and the other kids who would eventually form the core of the FDP. And they all say he doesn't get it. We begin to realize the kid wearing the mask now is very different from the man who started the FDP. He just doesn't seem to have wanted the same things. We don't know all of his goals yet, but importantly, it's becoming clearer and clearer that Kenji does. Kenji knows who's under that mask. Unlike the last time he went to confront a person wearing that mask, he knows this time who he's dealing with. I think that means he can win. We'll have to wait and see till next time. All in all, decent work. But a story is ultimately determined by how it sticks the landing. And next time, that is what we are going to look at. But until then, let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.